Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Words of Art podcast. I'm your host, Dion Sanchez, and joining me today in this episode is Jeff Lee. Thank you for joining me today, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dion. How y'all doing today?
We're doing great, Jeff. How are you?
I mean, it's the world is a pretty interesting and challenging place here, so I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you from the heart here.
Absolutely. So, Jeff, if you could tell my audience a bit about yourself, that would be great.
Sure. I mean, whenever I sort of talk about my life, I have to start with the people that gave me my life, which is my parents. So my parents were boat people from Vietnam. They escaped communism in the fall of Saigon in 1975. They left on a 32-foot raft and escaped with their lives in their hands and spent about 6 years in different refugee camps in Thailand and the Philippines. Landed in Southern California in 1981. I was born a year later. So pretty American dream story, right? People with nothing come with the hopes of having something, and then, giving the opportunity for their children to have the opportunity to do whatever they want to do without worrying about the safety and health of their lives, right? And so my parents gave me a great opportunity to explore as much as I could. I mean, they gave me my first job. My parents were gardeners in Southern California, and I got to mow lawns at age 8. I learned two things very quickly at age 8. Number one, working sucks. It's really hard. And two, Dion, when you work in as the help, you're treated that way. So it was really helpful to learn that not everybody's equal, even though we say they are. And that's actually an important lesson of empathy to take away. Much of my life has really been focused on making sure that others don't feel the way I felt in those moments at 8 years old. Like little 8-year-old Jeff mowing lawns shouldn't feel that way, just like, little Dion shouldn't feel that way either, or little Joe or Susie. And so that's been really a guiding point for my life, right? I sort of break my career in life into 3 chapters. The first is a world where I dreamt of seeing as many places and spaces as possible. I was so lucky to work and travel to 85 countries around the world. I got to go to places as, beautiful in the Middle East, or in beautiful in Europe, and precious in Africa and in Latin America. I loved my time working at the State Department and working overseas in the United Nations and doing a lot of really cool work. But the place that really captured me was from 2010 to 2013. I worked in Afghanistan. I was supporting the US military, helping to build infrastructure and economic development across the country in sort of really crazy situations, trying to help rebuild communities and sort of build trust. And then the second half of that, I worked with a human rights organization, trying to train women on how to better advocate for their rights that were enshrined in the Afghan constitution, to give women the opportunity to live as an equal. To give them faith and encouragement that they could make a difference in their society. And with the news that you've seen in Afghanistan now, it's quite hard to watch, but it's a great example of why, anything we do, the most important thing is how we treat the people. And I think so much of that has been important for how I've tried to look at the world. After my times in Afghanistan, I went to work in politics. I worked, for 2 members of Congress as a national security advisor. And I also got to work for the governor of California. And, California, and I know you're based in Florida, but, California has 40 million people. If California were a country, it'd be the 5th largest economy in the world. Napa Valley, Hollywood, Silicon Valley, just as examples. But it really does sort of touch every point of society, that when something happens in California, other people react to it in the United States and in the world. And so I love being able to work for a governor that, we got to work on real issues that help real people. And some of the hardest work, including dealing with disasters, so fires, floods, droughts, mass shootings, some of the worst things. But it was a great opportunity where, your work can directly help save someone's life or help rebuild someone's life. So, in California, you have historic fires every year. I got to respond to all those fires and to help people, get money and support so they could rebuild their lives. That was meaningful work for me. And then in this third phase, I'm working in tech now and, do political work for technology companies. And now I'm at a small startup that focuses on housing and rental assistance. particularly focused on providing more options for people when they're moving in somewhere. So, especially in the space of security deposits, there's all this like upfront cost when you move somewhere. And I think it's so weird that everything else in life, you have choices, but when it comes to security deposits, you either pay it or you don't. So if you pay it, you get to live there. If you don't get to live there. So the company I'm at, Rhino, they provide a smaller premium for folks to pay, and then they can move in. And then if they pay their premiums and they pay their rent and they, don't leave a giant hole in the wall, they're good at the end of their lease, rather than putting, let's say, $2,000 together instead right up front. So for many American families, they have less than $450 of savings, right? So imagine right now where you have thousands, millions of people that are eventually going to be evicted in the next, few months ahead because of COVID-19 and the pandemic. Through no fault of their own, what are they going to do? So I try to focus my life on, putting in processes, policies, outreach to support people who are in circumstances that are harder and deserve more support. So that's sort of the arc of my life. And I'm looking forward to talking to you about some of those things in more detail.
Awesome. And I truly admire you for using your work specifically in equality and empathy and giving people a sense of freedom, whether it's through living structures or just the right to speak their minds as an equal and be treated equally. And I just really admire the fact that your work is surrounded by those ideals. You mentioned you were in Afghanistan from 2010 to 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Hope I had the timeline.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Emotionally, how were you affected? I know you're serving your country and helping others, but how emotionally affected were you by that? Because Afghanistan isn't known for its hospitality.
Well, it's interesting. I will tell you that one of the universal truths, what I've learned, I learned two things from Afghanistan. Number one, the longer you're in a place, the less you know, because these societies and communities are hundreds and thousands of years old. And for you to think you can come in and like master it and understand how it really works is so foolish. And, especially as an American, you need to be thinking about this with more empathy and more listening rather than sort of just talking. And Afghanistan is one of the most beautiful, but also one of the most complex societies I've ever seen up front, working with people, working with Afghan governors, working with Afghan leaders, working with, folks who work at the market. I mean, it's such a complex society. The second thing, which I think is important to highlight, is everywhere I've gone, whether that's Wichita, Kansas, whether that's, in Tbilisi, Georgia, whether that's in Kabul, Afghanistan, the people who have the least always seem to give the most. And so just because they don't have the same means or possessions or, resources doesn't mean they have a smaller heart. They usually have a bigger heart. And when I think about my time there, I mean, in terms of the positives, I mean, I learned so much about, how people interact in mid-conflict. I mean, this was an active war zone I was working in. I also learned sort of the importance of relationships and being most appreciative of the moments you have, because time is so short. I had colleagues and peers who weren't so fortunate. They had horrible things happen to them, or they were no longer here. It's hard to think about, especially in the current context now, where that country is about to go into a pretty horrible transition of leadership. And the potential, I think of, I picture the faces of the women I worked with, I picture their children, I picture their friends. And Afghanistan isn't just something on a map to me. It's not some drawing, it's not some news cycle, it's relationships and lives. And I'm doing everything I can to make sure I can get my staff and their families and others out as quickly as we can, because they deserve a future too. The future that we sort of told them they could have. So I think we do have a commitment there. The second part of that, to your question of like, how was I affected negatively? I mean, your life is on hold. I missed countless weddings. I missed countless births of children. I missed funerals, sort of major milestones,
Right.
And then when I came back, you get the question, hey, how's Afghanistan? You're like, oh, great. Okay. It's like saying, how's Disneyland, right? You're like, well, fine. And so, or how's college? Or, it's sort of, they don't actually want to know. And so you sort of feel sort of out of sync. And that's why your relationships when you're there are lifetime relationships, because only you and them know what that was. And that's always that chapter for you in your life and your time. And so your relationships are worth even more after these sorts of experiences. And yeah, I mean, it was just emotionally pretty hard. And, but at the same time, it makes you appreciate things so much more. I mean, once a month, family sent me, a care box of cookies and books and things, and you'd be surprised how much that can mean to you if you've been in a situation where people were shot, or people you worked with were kidnapped, or people that you were trying to build a partnership with have fled the country for whatever reason, right? So you're dealing with such hard things, and the little thing like a chocolate chip cookie, or some trashy magazine at the aisle of the store at Publix sort of gives you that sort of sense of keeping it funny. That's just important. So it was not an easy time, but I'm a much stronger, much more resilient person for it. And obviously those friendships, I hope I get to keep for the rest of my life.
Awesome. And I truly admire you for sharing this, because I'm gonna be honest, I'm not big on watching the news because it's really negative, but
it is negative. It sucks.
It's really negative. But I did see what was happening over there, and it's really disheartening that those people have to go through that, because we all want to live in a society of comfort and safety and not chaos, and probably a mishmash of other negative words that I can get into, or else I'm going to start crying. So
yeah, it's tough. But again, it makes you appreciate your friends, your family, your coworkers that you respect. It makes you appreciate it. Also, when you travel so much, it makes you also appreciate your own country, despite all its imperfections. I mean, this is still the greatest country in the history of the world, but it's not perfect and far from it, right? Especially when you think about systemic racism that this country still has to face and reckon with. When you think about the inequality in this country, when you think about people that we not have access to services, live in homelessness, live in conditions that are just, morally questionable, that you allow for that. So this isn't perfection. This is not the kingdom of heaven, right? But this is also the place where my parents, right, who are free range organic chicken farmers in Georgia, can raise their children to have a college education that they never had, to have opportunities at jobs they never would have ever had, and to have friendships and experiences that they can only dream of, just because they were able to sacrifice to come here, right? Everywhere else in the world, that doesn't really happen, So that's how I think about it. But again, just because we do things pretty special here doesn't mean it's perfect, and it's up to everyone at an individual level, at a human level, at a passion level, to think about the fundamental question when you wake up is, what are you going to do to make the world a better place? And what are you going to do to make yourself a better person? And I think that's just so important, because again, as my mother told me growing up, you only live once unless you're Buddhist or Hindu, so you should make it count. And she's totally right.
Absolutely. And I truly live by those particular ideals. I was raised to treat everyone with kindness and acceptance, and that's just my God-given nature inside of me. Probably people think I'm way too nice. I don't have the heart in me to be cruel or mean, because why would you want to be cruel or mean to anyone?
There's a lot of people out there that have some issues, it's hard. It's really hard, but that's why we have to sort of stay positive and upbeat despite all the horrible things, despite a global pandemic, despite the end of America's longest war, despite so many of the things you could easily point to and feel really disheartened by, systemic murders of communities of color, whatever that might be. You have to find silver linings. And at least for me, in the work that I try to do, I try to implement things that could help as many people as possible, knowing that people, if given the right opportunity, can do extraordinary things.
Absolutely. And I totally believe in the silver lining to things. I've undergone a lot in my life. I got diabetic at the start of the pandemic, in a way that kind of rhymes. sort of, but it doesn't make it all that less shocking, because to get diagnosed with anything during this pandemic makes it all the more terrifying and fearful. But I took that experience not as a curse, which many people in my family did see it as a curse.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it as a blessing in disguise, because
Yeah.
I could have died if I hadn't gotten that diagnosis. And that particular diagnosis led God to give my life more purpose, to be a warrior for change, and inevitably led to me launching this podcast a year ago as of next week. So
Yay.
that's pretty cool. And just giving others a chance to share their stories when the world may have silenced them.
Mm-hmm.
So well, I guess we can get on to the icebreaker question.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about there, but yeah, would love it. Let's hear the icebreaker.
So the icebreaker question is, if you had to come up with a title or a chapter for where your life is at right now, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. I think it would be oh my gosh. I don't think I've ever actually been asked this before. But I think it's something along the lines of when you truly embrace your full self, you can be your best self. That's, I think, how I would describe it. A year ago, I just as the pandemic was happening, I was flying for work and I was in transit. I was trying to get through security like everyone does, right, in that situation. And I was rushing to get to the gate to get to California. And this woman came up to me and she just spit right in my face. And just big, giant loogie. And, as an Asian American, you're sort of taught quickly. The number one thing is you can't stand out. You shouldn't rock the boat when things happen, because if you do, bad things happen to you. And so what I naturally did, because number one, this has happened to me before, so I know how to react. And number two, usually I react with a joke. And so when she spit on my face, I said, well, if I knew it was going to rain, I should have brought an umbrella. And I looked around, there were about a dozen people, and every one of them looked at me and then just looked away, pretended it never happened, that it didn't matter, that I didn't matter. And it made me realize that, number one, getting spit on sucks. Number two, what's worse than getting spit on is watching people condone that, to not stick up for you, to not stand up for your fellow human. And that's when I realized, Dion, that I had spent my entire life just trying to blend in, and I needed to say something, that nobody was going to say something for me. I had to say something. And so for those next coming months, I was trying to sort of find my voice and sort of talk about how do you talk about Asian hate, because so many people think Asians got it great and like they're really nice and they work really hard, that sort of stereotype.
Yeah.
But the truth is, this is a group of people that, have been considered foreign since the dawn of time here, who, Japanese Americans and Chinese Americans have been here since the 19th century and have been here longer than most European Americans. And we still treat them like, hey, where are you really from? Or, hey, your English is so good. Or what I'll tell you happened to me a couple weeks ago, two guys went up to me and they're like, hey, Buddha, can we rub your belly for good luck? 2:00 in the afternoon. And again, I've been asked this before, so I have an answer for it. And two, it should be funny, because if it's not funny, it gets into an altercation. And if you're a person of color in a situation, you probably get killed, generally, right? Yeah. That's the way it works, right? Yeah. That's the way it works. So I had a joke. I said, hey, here's the thing. You don't want to rub my belly because I don't have any wishes for you. I'm not a genie. And they're like, yeah, that totally makes sense. I was like, yeah, thanks. Here's the thing. Police officer right by the whole time. So we have this world that allows for conditions for this to happen, where people actively suppress the freedoms and values of other people. But we, the people who don't say anything, we create those conditions, not that person. The person's out of line, But when people don't say anything, that becomes the status quo. And so when you say the China flu or the Kung flu or the China virus, what you're trying to say is that it's Asian people's fault and that we should hurt them. And that's what happened to me last March. And then I'll tell you one more thing related to this icebreaker because it matters. When, my parents, right, they've been in the United States now almost 40 years, 40 years next month. And, they work 18-hour days. That's all they know. They're farmers. And they built this community of friends in Georgia for 20 years. And when the virus hit, there were 3 places that got hit the hardest in the beginning. One was in Rome, or one in Italy, one was in New York City, and then one was in Southern Georgia. Southern Georgia had almost 500 people die from a funeral, some of which worked with my parents in some way. And over the course of those few months, from March to August, people didn't want to spend time with them. And eventually one of them said, hey, listen, we loved having dinner with you. We love doing business with you. We love being friends with you, but we can't spend time with you anymore because you're the reason why the virus is here. So, never mind they had spent 20 years together through ups and downs. They were friends with them one day and then saw them as the enemy another, right? Think about that. And that's when I decided I was going to write something. So part of the reason why we're talking today, Dion, is that I realized I needed to speak up for my family. And so I wrote this article in the tiny little paper in Southern Georgia. First time I ever wrote something for public, first time ever. And it was about the contributions of immigrants during COVID-19, like my parents, but others. I wrote it, I sent it out. I'm like, okay, a couple people will read it, let's see. And I just got all these messages from people. And also, so 2 things happened. One was I got a lot of positive responses, which is not normal. In writing, usually you get a lot of hate mail. And then 2, the neighbors read it, my parents' neighbors, and they apologized to my parents. And so that was, and it's funny because they've seen me over the years. They go, oh yeah, that's Lee's son. He's the one who works in those office jobs. That's how they think of me, right? Because I'm not a farmer. I send emails and I'm, in these shiny buildings, work for the governor of California, you're in an office, right? And then I realized that when you actually use your voice with sincerity and compassion and facts, and you just say it in a way that meets people where they are, you really have an incredible power. And so it's going to be my 1-year anniversary of that piece coming out. So August 30th. And in that time, I've written 40 pieces that made it all the way to like Politico and the New York Times and the Washington Post and in Florida and the Orlando Sentinel and a few others, Miami Herald, right? For somebody who had no business writing, who had no business being in these publications, had no business, mattering. But I realized if I didn't do that, other people, and like me or many of their friends, loved ones, yourself even, they wouldn't matter either. So someone has to say something. And so that's sort of forced me to embrace all the things I've been sort of running away from, including my own heritage, right? Because, I'm as American as apple pie. I like to say I love baseball. I love hot dogs. I love monster truck rallies. I love all of it, right? I sound pretty American, right? Like there are all these things that I think I'm very American, and somehow many people don't think I am at all, despite working in Afghanistan for the country, despite serving the largest state in the union, and despite working for companies that touch more people than anyone else on earth. It's never good enough. You never matter enough. And that's when I said, you know what? I'm just going to say whatever I want to say. And I'm going to, just drop it in the laps of people who really need to hear it. And they can decide for themselves, right? And that's what's happened is when I embrace those things, then you realize that you do have a power, an obligation, a responsibility, whether that's talking about other plights of Asian Americans who live in poverty, whether that's using your voice to support Black Lives Matter, whether it's using your perspective and your experiences to talk about the plight of women and opportunities for women in Afghanistan. We have a responsibility. And I want people to know that when you embrace all the things that make you you, when you become your true self, that's where you have power. Your power is not from hiding. Your power is from accepting who you really are. That's power.
Absolutely. I almost don't want to give mine away, but I kind of already shared it anyhow. My title or chapter for my life is basically being a warrior for change. I shared a small tidbit of my story with you, being diabetic in the pandemic, which being diagnosed with anything in this pandemic, again, is really absolutely terrifying. And we're about 2 years into this, which means I'm 2 years into being diabetic. So the fact that I was able to survive this new diagnosis during this crazy virus is an absolute blessing in itself. But apart from that small little tidbit, I've undergone a lot of health issues growing up. Had to overcome a lot of obstacles. Nothing compared to yours, but all of us have our own fair share of obstacles that have shaped us into who we are right now, all for the better, I strongly believe. But I feel like a warrior really reflects everything I have come across in my life and continue to come across. So that would be the title or chapter for where my life is at right now, being a warrior for change. So.
Yeah, amen. I mean, that's why it's important. And, the hardest step in the journey is the first one. And then the second one is when you want to take a step and something holds you back from doing it. What makes you keep going? Those are the two tough ones. So that's great that you're moving forward on that.
Thank you. So on to the fun icebreaker game.
Yes, fun. We like fun.
Yes. So this icebreaker game is called Song Association. You have to be an avid singer to understand this game. Okay. I'm certainly not an avid singer, so I wouldn't expect my guests to be an avid singer. Pretty much how the game works is I give you a word. Okay. And you can either say it, sing it, rap it. If you want to sing it, feel free. Again, this is an open forum to do whatever you want on my podcast. But basically, I give you the word and you either have to sing it in either the song title, like the word could be in a song title, or it's in the lyrics.
Gotcha. Okay.
However, there's a catch.
Uh-oh.
Time is not a luxury. You have 15 seconds.
Okay.
Based off of the word I give you, for the word pertaining to the song title or in the lyrics.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm ready.
So let me find my timer. Okay. The first word is heart.
Oh, you're tearing up my heart when I'm with you. Do. Everyone loves Little NSYNC.
Yes.
Everyone loves Little NSYNC. Come on.
Man, you did good. And that was the song I was thinking of whenever I give this word, and you just nailed it off the.
Well, can I say I'm Asian? I should be pretty good at karaoke, so it's one of the powers I should have. So.
So let's see if your Asian persuasion of words is good with this next word. Okay, so the next word is words.
Words. Oh my gosh. More than words. Do. There we go.
Ow, 2 out of 2 so far.
I know. Look at this. We're on our way.
You might be the first person to get all 3.
Oh no, now there's pressure. Now I'm screwed here. All right. Okay.
So the last word. Oh, I feel like I should change it to make it difficult, but I'm not going to be cruel. The last word is change.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. The Tupac song, Changes. He's got that. What is the lyric? Oh my gosh, it's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite Tupac songs. I missed it. See, I missed it here. I missed it. Love that song though.
I feel like that is a song, but you have to sing.
I know. Da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. That's just the way it is. That's right. Some things don't never change. There we go.
But
That's
the
okay.
timer, that was so good though.
That's okay. Two out of three is not bad. That's the game. It's okay.
That's what joys about this new game, and I'm so glad I introduced it into my podcast because it's so fun.
I love it. That's great.
Well, we can keep singing as many songs as we'd like to, but we're at the end of this awesome episode. Jeff, do you have any social links where people can find your website? Are you going to have a movie in the future? Give us an inside scoop to
no, but I will. I mean, for the audience here, I mean, they can follow me on Twitter at Jeffrey D. Lee. That's Lee with one E. And I hope you'll put it in the show notes. And I'll send you I'll have some of my recent articles for you to check out, and TV appearances, so you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. But I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and to stump me on on songs. And now I'm really sad for my boy Tupac, so I'm gonna have to get back to that. So thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
No problem, Jeff. And I'm sure Tupac will forgive you. It's fine.
I know he's still around, so I'll just touch up with him.
To all my listeners, thank you for joining us on this latest episode of the Words of Heart podcast. I am your host, Dion Sanchez. Thank you again for joining me, Jeff Lee. And once again, stay healthy, stay safe. If this episode resonated with you in any way, shape, or form, or if it's reached you in outer space, which would be so cool, please don't hesitate to let me know on the following platforms. You can find us at the Words of Heart podcast on Facebook, and you can also find us on YouTube under the same name, and of course, wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and Google. Either way, please don't hesitate to share your thoughts, and again, stay healthy, stay safe. Every one of you matter. Please don't think otherwise. Every single life, every soul, every person on this earth truly matters. You matter. You have a purpose. Even though my internet is acting up right now, either way, please don't think you are less than anything, because you're not. So again, I am your host, Dion Sanchez, and until next time, bye.